This is the Committee of Precinct Chairs, February 19th, 2026, 6:03 PM, calling the meeting to order. We are at the Great Hall at Town Hall on Court Street in Plymouth. We do have a hybrid format, and I do see a number of people online that are also COPC chairs, and we actually have a lot of people online between town staff and general public. I appreciate everyone stepping in while I'm just waiting for some of them to come in through the waiting room. I'm just stalling, stretching for time here. Okay, I think we have everyone into the room. So I'm going to call the roll. Precinct 1.
Christine Pratt, Precinct 1.
Precinct 2, myself, Matt Tavares. Precinct 3.
Dale Weber, Precinct 3, where it all began.
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Charlie Beautrain.
Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is absent at the moment. Precinct 6.
Robert Freeland, Precinct 6.
Precinct 7.
Precinct 7, Beth Gregg.
Precinct 8.
Precinct 8, George McKay.
Precinct 9. Absent. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, Alan Costello.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Chris Merrill.
Precinct 12.
Precinct 12, Pat Adelman.
Precinct 13.
Precinct 13, Ron Riley.
Precinct 14.
Precinct 14, Jeanette Kelly.
Precinct 15.
Sue Grady, Precinct 15.
Precinct 16. Do not see. They told me they might be online, but I do not see Precinct 16 at the moment. Precinct 17. Also absent. Precinct 18.
Precinct 18, Carmen Lee Ferrieri, in the middle of it all.
We do have a quorum, so having the quorum, I'd ask and invite you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we have a number of articles this evening to go through. I'd like to welcome Mr. Brindisi, the town manager, here to speak to a number of them. There is, and I'm sure Mr. Brindisi will say this as well, there are a number of department heads and staff either in the room or online. So as we're rolling through these, we'll, if you have any questions, we can direct them to the appropriate parties. As with what we did last meeting and what we're doing again for each of these articles, I do allow us to discuss as a COPC chairs and vice chairs to discuss the articles and ask questions, and then I will allow some time for public comment after each article. Be it online, if you could raise your hand feature, or if you're in the room, please come up to the podium. Just make sure that whether you're online or in the room, you state your name and for the record. Thank you very much. And so, Mr. Brindisi, welcome back. It's been a few short months since we've seen you here. So
Good to be back.
all right. So I guess we'll start up with you, and you can roll through these as you see fit.
Great. So good evening, everybody. Derek Brindisi, town manager. So I'm just going to give you the typical traditional budget presentation. Many of you who've been watching select board meetings or other meetings, you probably have seen this already. But I'll go through this again. I think we actually did a similar presentation for the League of Women Voters a couple of weeks back. So just to start off, I just give folks a better understanding of the length of the budget process itself. So the finance departments, they start to look at revenues, and expenses, trying to estimate, what our numbers are going to look like going back to September. That's really when we kick off the budget presentation. And then we typically have a meeting with select board members, school committee members, the school superintendent, his business team, and Ms. Barrett from finance, our finance director, and others. And we put our collective heads together right around October, looking at what our projected revenue is going to be, and that helps formulate the budget message. And so we issued that budget message right around the same time around fall town meeting, and that goes to the various departments so that they know what their left and right limits are as it relates to building their budget for that proposed fiscal year. So then, once those budget submittals are submitted, we sit down, Ms. Barrett and I and the assistant town manager, we sit down with each one of the department heads. We go line by line through their budget submittals. We talk about priorities. We talk about new initiatives. We talk about budget drivers so that we can present a balanced budget. And then, as you all know, in December, we present that balanced budget to the select board for discussion. And then in January, as you know, the select board, they'll vote their final budget recommendation, which gets advanced to finance committee. I will have to say that the select board is preparing for March 4th, a budget workshop. So we're going to look at this process, elongate it to see what works, what doesn't work, and then come back. Because a lot of the things that we do, Ms. Barrett is estimating, right? So we're estimating what our revenue is going to be. We're estimating what state aid is going to be well before we get these actuals. So, for example, the budget presentation that I submit to in December is 2 months in advance of the governor's budget coming out. The governor doesn't release her budget until January, the third week of January. So, we're a little bit of handicapped when we present that budget. And so the budget workshop that I just mentioned is going to look at all of that. And, we've even had conversations of, should we push out town meeting to May so that we have actuals that we're dealing with when we go to town meeting? So moving on to the budget itself, and again, a lot of you folks have seen this in the past, but just as kind of a recap, when we look at our revenues, this is the breakdown in revenues. So as you all know, 73% of our budget comes from local property taxes, 11% comes from state aid, 8% local receipts. Our enterprise revenues represent 6%, and then other at 2%. So that's the revenues. And so what I have always focused in my 5th year here in town, can you believe that? Really focusing in on what are the new revenues versus what are the new expenses, right? Because this is a large budget. And so to just look at a $350 million budget can be overwhelming. So I try to narrow the conversation down. What are our new revenues and what are our new expenses? So this presentation is going to have multiple passes at the budget so you can get a better sense of what we do when we're looking at revenues and expenses. So our first pass of the budget, you'll see our new revenues. So this is the left-hand table over here. New revenues on taxes was $5.7 million. Moving downward, new growth was $3 million. So as you all know, I'm going to talk about new growth tonight, but new growth we've been budgeting for the last many years, $3 million. And you're going to start to see a decline in new growth, but that's part of our revenues. And so we count on new growth in order to balance our budget. Local receipts went up a few notches this year at $2.8 million. So when we first looked at this, we said, okay, we got $11.5 million of new revenues. And as you know, we made a commitment just a couple of years ago with the school department that they represent 61% of the budget, so they will get 61% of the new revenues, and we represent 39% of the budget, and we will get 39% of the new revenues. And so prior to that, that's not how the revenues were split. It was basically everybody submits your budget, and we all get in a room, we close the door, and we see who wins in the end. Now it's like, listen, you got 39% of the budget. You got to figure out how to live within those means. School department, you have 61%. You have to learn to live within those means. And it's worked out extremely well because it takes all the debate away. But the problem that we have is that our expenses are outpacing, you see here, are outpacing our revenues. And so the first pass of the budget, going back to that November discussion, we had $20 million in new expenses going towards the budget, which, as you can see, the difference there, we had a $9 million shortfall that we had to cover. On the town side, we had $7.8 million worth of submittals. On the school side, they had $5.6 million worth of submittals. And health insurance, I pull that out in particular because the health insurance alone went up by $5.1 million. Our pension obligation, which you all know, is we're mandated by the state to pay our annual pension. And so that came at $1.7 million. If you just take those two numbers alone, you're about $7 million with two line items. Again, we only have $11.5 million in new revenues. So you can very quickly do the math that we're going to have a budget problem. We haven't even got into the operating budget yet, and we've already consumed over $7 million in new expenses. So again, $20 million was the first look at the expenses. So then we did it again. So we went back and said, okay, listen, we need to do a couple of things. We need to increase revenues, and we need to decrease expenses in order to bring a balanced budget forward. So I just mentioned on the last slide, this 11.5 number. So I'm going to start there again. 11.5 is our version 1. We have, at the time of this discussion, we had $2 million in excess levy capacity, and we made a collective decision. In order to have a balanced budget, we need to use $1.7 million of excess levy capacity. In the past, we also would raise and appropriate $500,000 to put into the nuclear mitigation fund, and we'd also raise and appropriate $500,000 to go in the capital improvement stabilization account as well. We pulled those out, and we added those towards the new revenues. And then in the last couple of years, we've had a healthy roads improvement program, as you all know. You can see the number of road miles that have been paved over the last 3 years. And that's because of the commitment the select board has made to streets and sidewalks. But because of this year's budget, we had to pull an additional $400,000 from that account. So dropping from 2.6 down to 2.2 and add that towards new revenues. And then again, historically in the past, we have funded the OPEB account approximately, I think it's $1.1 million. This year, we have proposed to take $900,000 of that OPEB money and pull it over to the revenue side. So we were able to increase our revenues to $5.5 million. Again, we still have the same budget problem on the expense side of $20 million, but we had a difference of about $5 million to the town. That meant $3.7 million worth of cuts. And the school side, that represented $1.2 million worth of cuts. So at this juncture, we went back to the department heads on the school side and the town side. We said, listen, department heads on the town side, we got to shave out $3.7 million of the budget because there's no more revenue to generate. And the school superintendent, they did an amazing job, and they did the same as well. So the budget reductions that I mentioned, that $3.7 million, this is just a snapshot of some of the items that we cut out of the budget. And the whole point is this, is that when we go through the budget process, we're not just spending money. We're looking at line by line and trying to figure out where our priorities are. And sometimes we have to make extremely difficult decisions in order to get there. And you'll see in this proposal, the IT, and Joe Young is the IT director, there's a lot going on in the IT world, as you can imagine, and there was a request to add 8 additional personnel in this year's budget. We had to eliminate that request. An additional $90,000 in equipment. The police, I think Chief typically requests 12 cruises every year. We had to cut 2 of those cruises this past year, so only able to provide 10, I believe was the number. But again, the bottom line is we had to cut 2 cruises from the chief's request. We did some changes on the police expense line item. One of the items, just worth noting, is that we have spent over the last 3 years $50,000 just to pay a contractor to enforce the parking district over at White Horse Beach. We pulled that $50,000 out. We were very creative with the Commission of Health and Human Services, and we're actually going to bring that parking enforcement in-house, saving $50,000 to the budget. And then moving forward, so the fire department, and I'll talk a little bit about the fire department later in my presentation. The chief asked for 8 additional firefighters. We weren't able to meet that request, so we had to pull that out of the budget as well. You can see $180,000 in departmental requests for fire as well. We then, I just want to note this, we had 2 positions that are unfunded this year, 2 craftsman positions we were not able to fund because of the budget cuts. And then we also had to include, which we started last year, this whole conversation about a vacancy factor. We included an additional $78,000 deficit in one of the department's budgets, which is known as a vacancy factor. So in total, and there are other cuts, smaller cuts, but I just want folks to know, these are the things that we had to cut out of the budget to bring a balanced budget forward. This was the final breakdown. This is an old slide, so this number has changed slightly, and I'll give you the final numbers at the very end. But just you kind of get a sense of the year-over-year increase on the various departments. The only one you see that actually went down was the planning department. As you all know, Lee Hartman, a longtime planning director, retired, so we had a lot of changeover in that department. We had less costly new employees start, so that was what triggered the decrease. Worth mentioning that part of this budget, we bring in approximately $2 million in other sources of funds that help pay for the operating expenses. So again, $2 million, whether they come from revolving accounts or grants, also go towards this budget as well. This is always worth noting, because when we talk about budget cuts, everybody says there's so much fat in the budget. And I do have to say, because I don't have a slide on it, the select board went through a 4-hour discussion to talk about cutting 1% out of the budget. And so during that budget discussion, we were able to cut an additional $170,000. 1% would have been 1.5 million, I think, Lynn? So if we cut $2.5 million out of the budget, it would have represented $2.5 million total, 1.5 on the school side and $1 million on the town side. And so through that process, what I think we were able to demonstrate is there's not a lot of fat in the budget. You know, when we start talking about places to cut, people realize that those are priorities. And so when you look here, when you really want to make significant cuts in any municipal budget, you're talking about people. 72% of our budget represents our workforce, right? 49% on the salary side, 23% relative to benefits and fringe. And so that's where the lion's share of all of our dollars go. It goes towards the people that do the work day in and day out. Debt service, we know we can't cut, right? That's our mortgage. That's how we pay our bills, right? That's how we pay for this building, for example. So that is an area we cannot cut. And then other expenses, there's not a lot of other expenses, although that's a big piece of the pie at 21%. That's our fuel line item, that's our utility line item, that's our training line item. We've got to keep, apparatus moving. We've got to keep cruisers moving with fuel. We've got to keep the lights on the building, so we can't cut in those areas as well, right? So the point in this is that it's a challenge to have a balanced budget year in when your expenses are outpacing the revenues, unless you want to cut people. When you decide to cut people, what you're saying is you're cutting services. So I just want to, because this is the one that scares me, and I've mentioned this a couple times, the health insurance line item went up over $5 million. And so this presentation, and we're working on this, we had a meeting with the Insurance Advisory Committee yesterday, and we've talked about this. So the original projection was about 14%. We're working on that. We're hoping we're able to lower that number, with some discussions moving forward. But again, it's still a $5 million increase. The total budget approximately is $48 million for health insurance. It's about $49 million. So that's a big chunk of our expenses. And so when it goes up by $5+ million, it takes away from providing services. So like I mentioned, the Insurance Advisory Committee, we met with those folks yesterday. We had a great discussion, I believe. The PEC agreement is what dictates health benefits to our employees. That agreement doesn't expire until 2029. So right now, there's nothing we can do at this juncture as far as changing health insurance. Although we have agreed that, maybe there are some places we can make some significant savings without having to open the PEC agreement. And I do have to say, and I've said this publicly at least a dozen times, that this agreement that was signed now 3 years ago was historic. I mean, it has saved well over $5, $6, $7 million in the first 3 years. So it was a great agreement for the school side, the town side with the schools and the unions that collectively came together and said, we got to help mitigate rising healthcare costs. But the slide on the right is probably the most important because rising healthcare costs isn't just a Plymouth problem. It's actually a problem that's happening in the Commonwealth. So the CEO of BID, Kevin Coughlin, stood at this podium back in January, and Mr. Quintal asked him the question about their healthcare costs, and he said their premium this past year went up 30%. And I know 14% is big, but 30%, I couldn't imagine what our budget would look like then. I was actually with one of our nonprofit agencies today talking about health care costs, and I asked them if their healthcare costs had gone up, and her response was that theirs went up by 20%. So this is a problem I really think it's mostly focused on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because if you look at the trends of what's going on with a lot of the agreements that the nurses unions are signing and things of that nature, that's all contributing to rising healthcare costs here in Massachusetts. So again, it's something that we're going to have to continue to work on collectively as a community. So just to break down, when you look at looking the side by side with the school department, this year's budget has moved a little bit. You'll see the town went from 39% to 44%, and the school department, although it's a much higher number, is representing about 56% of this year's budget. So I want to give into a little bit of this, although I know a lot of you have seen this in the past. So excess levy capacity is something we've talked a lot about. And it really peaked about 3 years ago at approximately $10 million. And so you've seen this steady decline over the years. This number here represents a $2 million in 2026 that we had going into this budget discussion. But part of the reason you're seeing a decline is, again, our revenues aren't able to keep pace with our expenses. So we have to keep dipping into excess levy capacity and pulling from that a couple $1 million each and every year in order to have a balanced budget. So we're going to continue to eventually see excess levy could be, at a point where we don't have any excess levy capacity. And I don't think, at least over the last generation, we've always had the luxury of having some type of buffer of excess levy capacity. So for those that really don't understand excess levy capacity, I like to use the analogy. It's kind of like a home equity line of credit, right? So you have a value to your house. The bank says, you have $100,000 in equity line of credit that if you need it someday, you can use it. But you don't use it unless you want to, say, repair your roof. So you pull $30,000 on it. But once you pull that money out, you have to start to pay the bill. And that's excess levy. We have access to, 3 years ago, we had access to $10 million of taxes that were not raised. But once you start pulling from that, you're basically raising people's taxes and you're going to start to pay the bill. So new growth is the next slide. Again, new growth is a major part of our revenues year in, year out, and that's because we've had substantial growth in the last number of years, especially post-COVID. It peaked out north of $5 million at one point. And so you're starting to see the new growth trends downward. This past year, new growth was certified at $3.3 million. We're budgeting $3 million, and we're expecting it to come in somewhere in that range. But for example, if new growth came in, say we budget at $3 million and it comes in at $2.5 million, we got to make up that $500,000 loss in revenue somehow. And so new growth is, I think, something, the trend is scary. The reason why is because if you look at the percentages of where the new growth is coming from, and this slide came out of the master planning process. When you go over the last 5 years, the vast majority of our new growth is coming from two places, Pine Hills and Red Brook. And we all know one thing about Pine Hills and Red Brook. they're wrapping up. I think Pine Hill is going to be wrapping up in the next 2 to 3 years, and Red Brook in a couple years after that. So how do we fill this space, this 40+% space, when all that new growth is gone? And those are the conversations the planning board with the select board, the Economic Development Foundation, they're having now. They're starting to have, tri-board meetings to think about, the opportunities around commercial growth and other economic development opportunities. Because once this goes away, that $3 million that we're budgeting in new growth goes away, and that's going to be a problem. So free cash, you guys know the story around free cash. We certified at $23 million this past year. It's a substantial amount of money. We know that. And this is for one-time use. This is how we pay all of our capital bills. So instead of borrowing, that we can pay for a one-time expense using free cash. But when we make significant cuts to the budget, you're going to start to see this number decline rapidly. So this is not a number anyone should get used to. You're probably going to be in the $13 to $15 million range. And so that's going to have a negative impact on our ability to acquire one-time expenditures like new fire trucks, like, dump trucks for the DPW, for example. So free cash is generated from a lot of places, but one of the major areas it's generated is from money that goes unspent. So in the fire or the police department, when they have vacancies, especially the police department, those vacancies from their police officers, all that money that wasn't spent on salaries falls to new cash, free cash, not new. So I'm going to wrap up in 2 minutes here, but I just want to bring this conversation forward and just use a slide. The chief gave this slide to me during our original budget discussion. And what you'll see, calls for service back in 2015, fire department had 7,000 calls for service. 10 years later, we're at 14,000 calls for service. In that same period of time, we've only added 8 new firefighters. And so the fire department is at a breaking point, which is why the chief asked for 8 new positions, because many of the calls for services are going to these large developments, Cottage, Oasis, The Walk. That's where they're going to. And our public safety departments are struggling with keeping pace with the volume of requests that they're getting on a regular basis. So the point of this is that revenues are declining, but we're having public safety issues that we have to address. And we're saying it now because in the future, we're going to be coming forward and saying, listen, we need to fund these positions. If not, it's going to have an extreme negative impact to our residents around public safety. State aid, the governor came out with her budget around the 3rd week of January. It was a net new state aid, approximately $800,000 to the town, which honestly doesn't sound like a lot of money. But for a governor's budget, it's probably the best governor's budget I've seen to the town of Plymouth in my 5 years here. So traditionally, it typically only goes up. Last year, I think the governor's budget was around $350,000, and it went to 2.5 once it went through the House and the Senate. So, I don't know. I can't predict what state aid ultimately is going to be, but it's starting off very strong. I can tell you, though, talking to the state delegation, that their revenues are down at the state level as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I also heard that 50% of the state budget is what? Healthcare costs. 50%. So again, we know they'll be grappling with their own budgetary issues. So this is the last slide. I just wanted folks to be aware, so where did we land in the end? So the total general fund budget landed at $308 million. Article 9, which is the sewer enterprise fund, landed at $9.7 million. Water enterprise, Article 8, $6.1 million. Solid waste was a little north of $1 million. The airport enterprise account, $3.8 million, and the cable access enterprise account was at approximately $1.5 million. So in total, you see that the total budget in its entirety, grand total, is about $343 million, $177,000. So I will stop there. I know there's probably some questions that need to be asked. As you pointed out, Mr. Tavares, we have a number of division department heads here that can help answer some more detailed questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Brindisi. So I know, so the way that Mr. Brindisi wrapped this up, it encapsulate Articles 7 through 12 on the, our agenda. So I would allow for, any questions regarding either the presentation itself, some general questions as well, but to stay within those articles as well. So I'll open it up. I do have one person, one chair online that has his hand raised, and I open it up to those in the room. So Mr. LaFrari, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mr. Brindisi, for walking us through this budgetary information. Could you restate or explain how these budgets are reviewed? Is it with one committee or is it with each individual department identified on the previous slides? And I'm also curious how effective the current process is, and I'm concerned if it is just with a single committee.
So that's a great question. So I guess I'll start from the top, going back to November. Myself and the finance director, we sit down individually with each one of the department heads and go through the individual budgets. Once that is complete, then we have a balanced budget we bring forward to the select board. The select board goes through, so once we do a similar presentation, they have the opportunity to meet with myself, the finance director, various department heads, over the course of, I'd say, 4 to 6 weeks, to go through the budget, answer any questions that they may have. And then we come back in January to the select board in a public forum just like this. We have a similar discussion. Questions can be asked publicly. And then the select board makes their final determination and their recommendation. Once that's complete, that's then advanced to the Advisory and Finance Committee, and then they go to work. They have I think 5 subcommittees, and then each one of those subcommittees, they are assigned various departments, and they meet with those. So those committees are usually 4 to 5 individuals on FinCom, and they meet with the department heads individually. They do their own analysis. They then bring that forward to a final recommendation that goes to the full Advisory and Finance Committee, which they held a public hearing last night. Each one of the subcommittee chairs will do a presentation on their work, and then they will provide a recommendation back to the full Advisory and Finance Committee. Once they finish all their work, which again took place last night, the Advisory and Finance Committee's recommendation will go to town meeting, where you all have your opportunity to ask those same questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Merrill.
Thank you. In regards to the budget and the debt overlay, is there any opportunity for the town to refinance any debt, or are we still locked into some ultra low rates with that debt outstanding? And if so, if we could look into that, there might be some cost savings if we refinance some of our total outstandings.
Yes.
Lynn?
So in the past, we've done that and you only want to refinance, obviously, when the rates are lower than the rates that you actually have. So the rates that we have on our debt are much lower than the rates that are out there right now. So we wouldn't refinance anything at this time.
Any further questions? Mr. Costello?
Yes, but, for the town manager, going back to your very first slide, you had town, school, I think health and pensions. The health and pension line item, how does that break out between the town and the school? Is that still the 61% to 39, or is that all absorbed on the town side, health and pensions?
Right.
So we break out actual school versus town on health insurance. It's not like a 60-40 split. So when he talked about the revenues, these are revenues after all of those fixed expenses. And then we share those 60-40 at that point. The fixed costs come out of the revenues at first in total. And they're shared between the town and the school, but it's actual numbers.
So on the right-hand side, increased expenses. Health is $5 million. What percentage of that 5 million is the town?
I can get that figure for you. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the COPC? I see Catherine Holmes online. Go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, thanks, everyone. I just have more of a comment. It's deeply concerning to see that the healthcare costs have gone up so significantly. But I think what's important to remember is that, yes, the health insurance costs have gone up for the town, but they've also gone up across the board for the majority of our residents. So our residents are paying more in healthcare, they're paying more in groceries. We've all heard this from the residents that we're supporting. So I am also very concerned about continuing to put the debt on the backs of the taxpayer, knowing that we have this undisclosed amount that's going to be coming before us, because we know we've got additional schools that we're going to have to rebuild or do significant improvements to. So I think when we're going forward in town meeting this spring, we need to put that on the forefront of every single voting person's mind in town meeting, that I would like to see further cuts happening. I don't see how this is going to be sustainable for the residents. These people the majority of the people are on salary freezes, they're getting bonus cuts. People are struggling to pay their mortgages. Healthcare is going up for them as well. So I think we need to be very cognizant of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Christine Pratt.
So, Mr. Brindisi, some years ago, we had a Revenue Ideas Task Force that did an analysis on the service or alarm calls by the fire department and the police department. And one of the things that was recommended was that for false alarm calls, that there be a chargeback for frequent calls. And I'm wondering if anything ever evolved with, 14,000 calls, the increase of 14,000 calls to the fire department, and I'm sure the police department is seeing something, a spike in theirs as well. So is there a program where if, for example, a commercial enterprise frequently has false calls, false alarms, or a retail enterprise chooses not to not to proceed with any kind of suit against, say the police department gets called. Do we have a program where we charge back
Yes.
for false alarms?
Yeah, we do. After the third false alarm call, they start getting fined.
And is that managed? So does the fire department have a revenue stream? Can you determine how many of those 14,000 calls were false? And how much we've charged back to those, commercial enterprises or that you can let us know about?
We definitely have the ability to look at our calls for service and determine which ones were false. I can say that, personally speaking, that, I have had many conversations with town council on habitual offenders of false alarm calls, to the point where even non-payment of those fines, we've had to take them to court. So I would say we have a fairly robust system in place to try to mitigate false alarm calls. We'd rather our police officers responding to real calls. Every time there's a call, we have to send 2 cruisers. So, that's really taking away from the residents. So, but we certainly can look at our data and report back.
Thank you. I'd appreciate to know how much we've received back and how much we've charged out.
Sure.
Catherine, I see your hand, and then actually I'm going to go with Joe Hutchinson, and then Catherine, I'll go back to you just in order of those who have not yet spoken. So, Mr.
Thank you.
Hutchinson.
When
you were going through the process, Mr. Brindisi. I wondered whether in inspecting, for example, the capital improvement committee's numbers over, say, a 5-year look back, was there any trend that you might have been able to see that could have provided warning for any capital expenses that were coming up? I know we've had problems with Memorial Hall and other buildings like that, and also what I'm digging for is trends. So this is numbers for this year. What are we going to look like in 3 years if trends continue? I mean, if we cut now, are we going to cut again next year? How is this going to work over time? Thank you.
So that's a complicated question because we're always trying to look at trends, right? So, our capital improvement program is really trend-based, right? So we have a 10-year capital improvement program that's looking at, what are our future capital needs over this 10-year period based upon, current conditions and past conditions and what future conditions, will realize. As far as trends with health insurance, that's a difficult one. So what we do is we look at claims for the prior year and try to estimate what, based upon those trends, what the next year is going to be. But I think in healthcare, we can't really look further than 12 months because we're using prior claims from the previous 12 months. So, I think we're always trying to look at various trends that are out there. I would say Miss Barrett, that's all she does all day is look at the various financial trends. We are in the process of building a financial forecasting model so we could start to really project out 5 years. What are the revenues looking like? I presented a trend about new growth earlier, right? So all those slides I presented are all just trends, right? And so the financial forecasting model would look at prior trends and try to, based upon those numbers, project what things will look like in the future. But again, they're all estimates and, they're never going to be perfect.
Will we have to make cuts again next year is kind of where I was going with it.
Well, it depends. So I would imagine that if we can't control our growing expenses based upon today's revenues, we would have removed many of the protective factors that were built into the budget. And I mentioned, give me a second here, I mentioned some of those. I'm going to go through them again. A protective factor in our budget is the excess levy capacity. That's trending downward. A protective factor is that we were using this amount of money. This was all money raised and appropriated from taxes. We've taken that away, and we're suggesting in order to continue to fund those programs, we got to use free cash. So we've taken away other opportunities for revenue. The only really other revenue opportunity that's outside of taxation, is really going to be at this point, is going to be new growth, which I always showed just trending downward, or our roads budget. We have a strong, robust roads budget. And, if we face a similar situation next year, I will tell you today that my recommendation will be to cut the roads budget, because that's the only other place, other than people, that's the only other place that we can make significant cuts and pull money over to the revenue side of the ledger. So, yeah, so to answer your question, if we can't fix some of these growing expenses, we could be faced with similar challenges next year.
Yeah, and that was actually my worry, is that year over year, if we don't do something to fix it, then, we're talking about the O word, and, that nobody wants to talk about that, but that might be where we are.
Catherine?
Mr. Brindisi, I'm
confused as to why we would say that we may need cuts next year, because if we look at what the superintendent has presented to the COPC over the years regarding just the buildings alone as to what they need in order to replace the existing buildings, and if you take the amount of money that it costs to refurbish significantly a building like, say, Manomet or Indian Brook or South Elementary, which is in dire need of refurbish, I guess what I'm missing here is the piece that says, where's the planning for the funding for those buildings that we've known for at least 5 years now that we need to replace? And then the second comment that I would make is that we continue in the town of Plymouth to service our residents with people versus tools and services. So I'd like to really understand better what the town of Plymouth has done in order to optimize certain departments to make them more efficient, and whether or not it makes more sense to outsource some of these functions. And I've been saying for years, one of which is the HR services. Now, there's very few companies that I interact with every day that doesn't outsource their HR function and to consultants. You don't have to pay for benefits, you don't have to pay for overtime and facilities, computers, you name it. So there's cost savings that can be done in those areas. And I feel like I haven't gotten a really strong understanding as to what the town of Plymouth is doing to drive efficiencies using technology.
Well, first I'd start by answering the last point about technology. I mean, that's the point of Mr. Young's request of 8 additional new staff. Like, everything we do is new technology. Everything we've done in the last 3 years, we've gone from paper to electronic formats. And that is weighing heavily on the IT department because they're not able to keep up with the number of software packages, licenses, equipment, pieces of equipment that are required to be supported because of technology. So, and I would say that, and I think every department head who I've worked with in the last 5 years realized that that's been my big push around technology. So, as far as your question around.
Hold on. I want to respond to that if I could, please. So as a businesswoman that is in technology, that's what I do. I live and breathe it every day. Why are we not looking at outsourcing our technology function to a company that we would not have to pay the benefits and the human capital and to be able to grow? And why are we not looking at whether or not there's some cost benefits and being able to do, an analysis in-house to get an RFI out to have somebody else come in and do our IT services for us?
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Young to help adjust some of that, but I can tell you many of the IT functions are already outsourced, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Young.
Yeah, good evening. It's a great point. We run kind of a hybrid department. We do outsource a lot of our like 24/7, 365 monitoring of equipment. We don't have 3 shifts of IT employees looking at our data centers and servers. We outsource that because it is cheaper. It's better, it's more efficient. But we're at a crossroads now where we need the specialized staff in-house to assist everyone to get their jobs done.
And have you done some analysis that shows why you need it in-house 24/7? And if you can reduce that and just outsource it for some consultants that could come in temporarily? Because what we're trying to do is take the burden of the healthcare off.
One of the examples I'll give you, in calendar year 24, we had 1 million emails coming through our system. In calendar year 25, we had 63.4 million.
That's
Most
not
of those are
uncommon.
people trying to do something that we don't want them to do to our systems. And that's why we monitor it 24/7, 365.
Right, but there's companies that manage security. So have you been able to look into whether or not outsourcing to a securities firm to monitor that on your behalf is more cost effective than bringing that in-house and having humans sitting in the room monitoring it live?
Yes, that's what we're doing.
I know that's what you're doing. I'm saying, have you considered looking at companies that you could outsource that to that would monitor your security on your behalf? That wouldn't require bodies and humans in healthcare?
We don't employ bodies monitoring them. This is outsourced to a third party. So exactly what you're asking us to look at is what we are doing. It is more cost effective.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood what you're saying because I thought you were saying that that's what you have to do. So the 8 bodies and what you're saying to me is you need to do round the clock IT services. Are you saying that you have that in-house or that you've outsourced that?
We outsource that.
Okay, so what is so outside of that, when you look at, say, HR as an example, hiring, resourcing, benefits, managing all of that, have you considered outsourcing that to a consultant or a company that does all that for companies every day, all day long?
Well, I'll answer the HR question. So, no, we haven't considered outsourcing HR. I'd be interested in those models, and I'd be also interested if those HR consultants work alongside of 7 unions on a regular basis, if they have to respond to requests for grievance hearings or have to prepare for arbitration, for example. What we do in municipal human resources is not just benefits. And so it's, very focused on personnel, wellness, and labor management. So, but I'd be interested to learn more about the models that you suggest. So, maybe there are some efficiencies there that we could take advantage of.
Well, Mr. Brindisi, in all due respect, like there is probably aspects of HR that you could outsource. And then if there's no other resource that can do your grievances and your arbitration for unions, as example, then, maybe you have a smaller team that handles it. But also I would think, I know you've talked to me about this before in the past, you have town managers that you work with in other communities. There is lots of resources there where you can look at driving efficiencies in what other towns are doing. And I think it's something that we should look at. I don't necessarily, I'm in IT, that's what I do, but I find it really interesting. Like, I'm a resident, like a town manager, like let's have the town management look into whether or not there's opportunities there that we can look at efficiencies. And I'm just throwing HR out as an example. But I think that when we're talking about, the place that we're sitting in with our current budget, it's important to look at every aspect of where we're able to drive efficiencies. It's just a no-brainer. Technology should be taking care of some of the places where we are sitting and relying on human bodies. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And we've had those conversations with select board members. Are there some functions that we do, that, are better handled by contractors? I know, that Mr. Weber often talks about, in decades past, we had a much larger DPW. And although I wasn't here during those times, I would imagine there were decisions made to, maybe instead of having multiple sewer or water crews, to outsource some of those functions. For example, sewer, for the most part, is outsourced. So, I do think that in lean times like today, we should look across the spectrum of all of our work and try to figure out if there's cheaper ways of doing it, but not losing the same level of service, right? So that's the thing. That's one thing we don't want to risk is the service level.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Riley.
Thank you. Facility stabilization was mentioned just a little while ago in tonight's paperwork. We have a letter from Lynn requesting $5 million for the stabilization fund for capital maintenance, and bringing this from 7.4 million to 12.4 million. Why such a large jump? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
And I'm sorry, and a couple of questions within this. How much have we put in over the last couple of years, each year? And what is, Memorial Hall is mentioned here, and do we have a revenue amount from Memorial Hall for last year?
Sure. So just so everyone in the room and online is following on, Mr. Riley speaking to Article 13 is that piece. So again, as I said
I'm
earlier.
sorry. It was in tonight's.
Yeah, then that's Article 13, the
All right, never
facility.
mind then.
Yep, yep.
I'll catch it another time.
No, and I am, with the way that this budget gets presented, I'm more than willing to talk about multiple articles that are listed out separately within the agenda, to keep everyone concise and working within the same budget, questions. Because some of these enterprise operating budget, you may not have any questions on. So, sorry to interrupt, but just
Yeah, no
letting
worries.
the room know.
Would you like me to answer, Mr. Chair? Okay. So I would start by saying that over, at least during my tenure, we've been able to contribute about $500,000 each and every year to that account. The reason why you're seeing a significant jump is because of what we're seeing at free cash. We don't expect to see free cash at this level, at least in the foreseeable future, at $23 million. So we believe that this was a very prudent decision, conservative decision to take a sum of money and put it into capital stabilization for all the points that Ms. Holm mentioned earlier. She mentioned that, we're going to need new roofs. We're going to need to put money into our school system. We mentioned Memorial Hall as just an example of a building that's been neglected over decades as a reason that we believe that let's take advantage of the $23 million free cash certification. Instead of spending it, right, what we're saying is let's save it. Let's put it in capital stabilization. The only way we can use that money is to come back to town meeting at a future town meeting and seek your approval to do that. So it's conservative knowing that we have significant capital needs, especially around buildings.
Thank you.
So I'm reading this correctly. I can't see that far. 23 million in free cash right now.
That is correct.
Yeah. And then, within this budget, what's the total movement of free cash that we're looking at as far as, we have the 5 million here and this, do we know how many requests we have for I guess I'm kind of going along the lines and maybe I'm off track, but as Mr. Hutchinson is, what's that going to look like next year as far as the free cash number?
I would say, so we'll close out the books on June 30th of this year. Lynn and her team will go ahead and file for certification. We aren't expecting a significant decline because there's been no real budget changes from the previous year. I do think it'll be a decline because free cash is made up in a lot of different ways, right? So, we have interest-bearing accounts, and so that helps, towards free cash as well. So depending on how the market is that year, that's going to affect free cash. The following year, we would expect significant declines in free cash because of the budget I just presented. So FY27 is going to sign July 1st. It's going to close out on June 30th, 2027. So that year, that fall of 27, when we get certified, I would expect a significant drop that year.
That's what I'm looking for. So thank you very much. Ms. Allen.
Does free cash have anything to do with our bond rating?
Yes, it does, because free cash is, at June 30th, the rating agencies look at our balance sheet. So our balance sheet shows what our undesignated fund balance is. And free cash basically represents what our undesignated fund balance is. And if your fund balances grow in a particular year from the following year, they look at that as a positive. So they look at that favorably towards our bond rating.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee, either online or within the room? Hearing and seeing none, I will, Ms. Murdizzi, as I spoke to you before, will allow for any public comment, if there is any, regarding any kind of what we've been discussing. And then, Lynn.
I just want to answer Alan's
Oh,
question
sure. Go ahead.
earlier. He asked what the percentage of the health insurance budget belonged to the town. Actives and retirees is 37%, and the school is 63%. The town is 37%, and the school is 63%. as a percentage of the health insurance budget.
And does that number go into the 61% of their side of the budget? Who's paying for
The school is.
the schools paying that 37%?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, fair
Yep.
enough. Thank you.
Any further follow-up, or you?
No, that answered my question. Fine, thank you.
Any further questions or comments either in the room or online? Not seeing any. Are there any public comments? And if you bear with me, I've got pages of people here, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing any. Not seeing any online. Thank you, Mr. Brindisi, for that
Thank you.
presentation. I know that that was kind of encompassing a number of different articles. Lynn, are there any articles you'd like to speak to in particular? I know we had you down for Article 16. Yep.
I'm here for anyone that you want.
Sure. I think if we could speak to perhaps Article 16 and then those that are encompassing Article 18, the capital requests. I know I do have a member of the public and I have a question myself within that the capital improvements request article. So just to kind of keep on page here, we'd be moving down within the agenda, unless anyone has any questions regarding those prior articles that I spoke to that we could ask on. Ms. Adelman.
Just, is there an article about facilities management?
Well, we have
That's Article
Article
13.
13 that we.
Is
It's 13?
the recommendation of the 5 million to be deposited into the facility capital maintenance stabilization fund.
Okay. All right. Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I'm not sure where this comes up, but the DPW building at 22 Mary B. Lane, I understand that's not being used, and why is it not being used?
It is being used. It's being used probably about between 30 and 60% of that building is being used by staff.
But I thought the town meeting article we approved for the purchase said it would be DPW headquarters.
It will be. So what's going on right now is we appropriated money to hire owner's project manager, which we have done. And then they're in the building committee is in the process right now of hiring a designer to plan the use of that building into the DPW admin building. So that process is going to take probably, 8 to 12 months. So we would be going back to town meeting in the future with a project to renovate that building.
So the intent is to have it DPW headquarters?
Yes.
And I rode by there the other day, and the old retail outfit's name is still on the building. Is there any intention to put town name on the building?
I don't think we'd want to advertise it as a town DPW admin building because we don't want the public to think that that's where they go to get a question answered. The staff that's in that building right now, like the sign shop is in there with their materials. We have the some custodial staff in there with storage. We plan on moving some facility craftsmen into that facility with their materials. So it's really just, those kinds of operations that are going on in there right now.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So
back.
Article 16, okay. So Article 16.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know you were gonna move off of Article 13. Are you done with 13 now?
No, I'm more than happy to entertain more questions and comments. With the way that the budget was presented to us, it kind of encapsulated a lot of these earlier articles, and that's where I was hoping to get questions. But we are here to ask questions, and I hope that we have some. So, Mr. Weber, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. I just want to go back to Article 13, and the memo that we got about facility capital maintenance that was priorly mentioned, to transfer $5 million into facility capital stabilization account. I would ask whoever wants to answer this, how we square that appropriation with the fact that we have frozen craftsman positions that do facility maintenance. How you square that with, let's appropriate $5 million to maintain buildings without filling vacant positions and leaving only 2 craftsmen to maintain all of the town's buildings? And how do you save, I mean, we heard, I see Derek's there. We heard the town manager open up under his budget presentation, heralding the fact that we're bringing in-house work back to White Horse Beach enforcement to the savings of $50,000, yet we're leaving bare bones the boots on the ground facilities maintenance workers, and will evidently, my opinion, is if we go to continue to maintain building infrastructure, we're going to be outsourcing, using Catherine's words, outsourcing that function and having to pay prevailing wage. So my simple question is, how do you square the fact that we're putting $5 million into facility capital maintenance and not filling needed craftsman positions to maintain all the town's infrastructure?
That's a great question, Mr. Weber. And so, when I think of the $5 million that we're recommending, that is for major renovations or construction, maybe to new facilities, all of which our craftsmen would not participate in. So if we were to make significant investment into Memorial Hall, we can both agree that our craftsmen would not have any role in making those improvements. If we were to fund a consolidated hedge in Cold Spring School, the craftsmen would have no role in that. Our craftsmen's their primary role is to do general routine maintenance, paint walls, fix cracks in doors, hang doors, things of that nature. Maybe build a picnic bench once in a while during the summer. But that account that we're referencing, to me, is for major renovations or construction of new facilities.
Mr. Weber followed.
Are we not contracting out right now simple petition wall buildings within this building that our craftsmen can certainly handle?
We have done both. We have asked our craftsmen to build a partition wall in the Human Resources Department, and we've also outsourced a partition wall. So to Ms. Holmes' point, you can understand the dichotomy that I'm in. I have one COPC member saying we got to hire more in-house staff. I have another COPC member saying we got to outsource more. So at the end of the day, we do the analysis and we have to make a recommendation and a determination on, what is the best use of taxpayers' dollars. And that's what our intention is.
My final rebuttal is, I just heard that you have Mary B. Lane staffed between 30 and 60%. Can you explain the detail of that? I think there's only 3 people in that building and they're
I
not
was
in there.
talking about the space that was being taken up in that building. So
But that's not going to be permanently.
no.
That's just somebody to occupy the building to
Yep,
keep our
there's probably
insurance.
about 3 or 4 people that are gonna occupy that building, and then we've taken up space for storage and equipment and supplies and that kind of thing.
So where
just
will
to-
that equipment and storage and supplies go when you decide to take the administration that's currently in 159 and 169 Camelot and move it into 22 Mary B. Lane?
I'm sure an analysis will be done of the existing buildings that they're using right now and the space that would become available to move those things over there when the admin goes over to Mary B. Lane. I think as part of the whole process of the OPM and the designer is looking at, this building and what they're gonna vacate in the other buildings.
So you said in your letter, with the tightening of the budgets in the many buildings that town has, I believe it's a prudent idea to set aside for future use. You mentioned Memorial Hall. I mentioned Mary B. Lane. I think the simple solution is put a for sale sign on each of those buildings. Thank you.
Catherine, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just have one comment since I was mentioned. I just want to say that when I speak in this forum, I'm representing the residents that voted me into this office. I'm not representing a union. I'm not representing the town management. I'm just providing suggestions as to things that they may want to consider based on my experience. And outsourcing is a way that I see that a lot of government offices and a lot of businesses are moving toward because it's cost efficient, especially in this area where we're trying to cut costs. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yeah, Mr. Weber.
No, last comment.
Oh,
promise.
no. We're here
Just
to ask questions.
Just remember that town employees are residents and taxpayers also. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on any of the prior articles leading up to Ms. Barrett presenting Article 16, 18? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. Finally got to it.
Okay, so Article 15, I'm sorry, Article 16 is, this article is a recommendation from myself to rescind the borrowing authority for a piece of fire equipment that town meeting voted on back in April of 2023. I'm sorry, that's not this article. This one is to rescind the debt authorization for the Bartlett Road Bridge. So basically what happened in this particular article is we went to town meeting, we appropriated free cash, and we authorized to borrow a total of 3.2 million. The project actually came in under budget. We spent almost $2 million. And we also received a grant, an MVP grant to the tune of almost $1.5 million. So this article is we're just asking to rescind the $953,000 that's left on the borrowing authorization. So we authorized to borrow 2.4 million, and the way it works is if you receive a grant towards a project that you've authorized to borrow, that grant reduces that authorization. So the remaining authorization is 953,000, and we don't need it. The project is complete. We just want to rescind it.
And that includes, it looks like we needed less free cash as well. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, we returned 301,000 of the free cash back to the general fund, back into free cash.
Are there any questions regarding this and borrowing for, I guess it was Bartlett Road? Okay. Are there any public comments that have any questions regarding this? Not seeing any. If we could go to the capital improvements, Article 18.
Yeah, so the capital improvements article, the way that we do capital improvements every year on an annual basis is we have all of the town departments update their 10-year capital plan over the summer, and that is due to the finance department in the fall. Myself, the town manager, when we sit with the departments to go over their capital requests, at the same time, they focus in on what their capital requests are going to be for that following fiscal year. So we meet with them, we go over those requests, we try to fine tune, focus on different areas of priority, and those projects are then the projects that we're going to focus on for the next fiscal year are then brought forward to the Capital Improvements Committee. And that committee met in early January, and they each department individually met with that committee, presented their projects, presented the items that they wanted to do. They were asked several questions. They provided a lot of backup documentation. And then the Capital Improvement Committee, at that point, ranks those projects as to how they rank amongst each other. The projects that are submitted to the Capital Improvements Committee are projects that we have a funding source for, that we are recommending to the Capital Improvements Committee. We don't recommend to the Capital Improvements Committee anything that we can't pay for. So at that point, the town manager and I, we put this letter together recommending the funding sources for those capital items. And it's a varied funding sources. We use general fund free cash. We use the general fund revenues that the town manager spoke of earlier, the 2.2, that's the road program, borrowing of 6.3, and then retained earnings from 3 enterprise funds will help fund these projects. Also some other funds that we have, fire prevention revolving fund, cemetery perpetual care, smart growth money, and Mass DOT grant funding. So we're recommending $21.4 million worth of projects, and those funding sources add up to $21.4 million. The materials that are, I think, that were provided to you include the memo that I did, plus the ranking spreadsheets for the projects. There were 2 spreadsheets I think provided. One of them was by rank from CIC, and then one of them was by department. And obviously, departments are here tonight to answer any specific questions regarding any specific projects.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it to the COPC, either in the room or online, for any questions or comments regarding Article 18. I guess, and I know I also have a member of the public and a town meeting member that would like to speak to Article 18, but I think it was the same one that I haven't fully gone through every single one of these line items, but I have a feeling this members of town meeting is also going to speak to this, because the one that stood out to me quickly looking through this was a priority number 2 for the Department of Parks and Forestry. And we're going back to the training green with lighting and irrigation, which town meeting had previously voted against this 220,000. I'm trying to figure out how this became a priority within Parks and Forestry. Town meeting said no once. Why are we looking at it again? What was the thought process to bring this back to town meeting and this time going through free cash?
Hello, Nick Fila, Parks and Forestry Superintendent. I will answer to that question. So on the floor at fall town meeting, the article was reduced by 220,000 to take away the pedestrian lighting and the irrigation. I took away a few of the major concerns, or the more popular concerns. One of them was the funding source. It originally was a CPC funding source. It's now a capital request, or free cash. The second one was that a lot of the town meeting members felt that the lighting that was chosen, the pedestrian lighting that was chosen, wouldn't reflect the era of the Frederick Law Olmsted design. So what we did for that is we went back, worked with the design firm to look at more historically correct lighting. We've actually found a really close match to what I've seen in photographs that were on the perimeter of the training green at one point. And so these poles that we've found, they also meet our light trespass bylaws, and they'd be more historically correct for the landscape. But moving on to talk more about the lighting, if that's okay. The reason why we want to add lighting, the primary reason is for safety. It's for accessibility. That's why we took another deep dive after fall town meeting to say how can we meet these concerns, and kind of meet in the middle so that we can provide that safety for travel through the park. So, I mean, as you know, lots of, and I'm sure Precinct 3 can speak to this, but lots of pedestrians travel through that area in the morning and in the night. So we just want to make sure they're not, that their way's lit. They're not going to slip on ice. They're not going to, somebody in a wheelchair is not going to go off route. We're adding ADA accessibility to this park so that you can view the monument and you can view the flagpole. So we just want to make sure that the pathways are lit and safe for that purpose. Other reasons like preventing vandalism, stuff like that. There hasn't been a ton of vandalism in this park, but this would help keep it that way. Obviously, the town's getting bigger, more and more tourism coming in, which is great. So we just want to make sure if it's lit in the early evening and in the early morning, no one's in there causing any funny business. Another concern, the irrigation, obviously. This park, we're going to be disturbing, it's roughly an acre, and we're going to be disturbing half of that at least. We don't know about any unknowns if it's going to be more than 2,500 square feet that we're disturbing, but if we don't have an irrigation system, if this project goes out to bid in the spring and it's construction, is in the spring, summer, or even the fall, we need to water the grass to establish the grass. There are two options to do that, I guess. There's an irrigation system, which is $87,000 line item, or there's using town resources that we really don't have, putting staff out there early morning every day to set up mobile irrigation systems with a big water tank that has an engine that's going to be running early morning. But again, you need to do this every day to establish this turf, or else you're not going to have grass. It's just going to be, half dirt, crabgrass, and then hopefully the areas that are already established would be green for most of the year. But it does tend to brown up every summer. So it's really crucial to add this irrigation system. I know it's $87,000. I know that's a lot of money, but once it's in, it's in. Now's the time to do it. We have all new walkways going in. We don't want to, shoot ourselves in the foot and say, all right, well, half the grass is dead now. We really should have put this in. Now we need to trench under all the walkways and add this irrigation system, and the price tag doubles. So now's the time to do the irrigation system. And also the lighting, we took a deeper dive, and hopefully we can kind of meet that concern of the historical components of the park.
Sure, I know, I know many residents, and it is Precinct 3, but I'm budding in
Sure.
Precinct
Yeah,
2,
no,
and,
yeah,
and I
of
know
course.
many residents have, after this, the lighting piece in particular is what they picked up on in town meeting. They live within the immediate area of the green, can see it from their house type of thing. And they did mention that it's an awfully dark park. But with the lighting component, I know you said you went back to the design team or consultant or whoever we were working with. This, I don't want to say all, I heard 86,000 for the irrigation. So call it the balance for lighting. Is that just, are we just looking at, besides what we talked about with the flagpole and stuff, are we just talking about perimeter lighting, call it closer to like the surrounding sidewalk that surrounds the training green? Or is there going to be lighting within this, what you're saying, this design here, is this going to go in the park itself?
So the lighting would be in the park itself. The engineering team did, look at a lighting plan where it would be most effective, how we can minimize the amount of poles. It's going to be it would be 6 poles. There used to be poles on the perimeter of the park. Yeah, but to me that's not serving the purpose of why we're trying to put the lighting in. We're trying to put it in so that it's accessible and safe. And honestly, I think that if the light poles were on the outside or the perimeter, that's going to be more of an eyesore to people passing by, because it's going to kind of be in the way, or it's going to be a little brighter that way. The poles we're using, they have like filtered glass on them that is going to help prevent glare to surrounding houses. It's really just going to be subtle. It's not going to take away from the monument or the flagpole. It's just going to add the safety and the accessibility features. So it'd be along the new pathways within the park, 6 poles. They're 12-foot poles.
Thank you, Nick. So I've asked my questions within this article of you. There may be other questions because
Sure.
there's a lot of line items in here. So,
Of course. I'm
so
available.
thank you, but stand by. I do have, so you may get called back up.
Thank you.
Mr. LaFrari, I see your hand. And then I have Mrs. Alman, and then I'm just going to go around the room right after that. So go ahead. Mr. LaFrari.
Thank you, sir. I was just wondering, I was reading some information about some of the items that were already funded, and I was just wondering if you could validate that, such as walkway repairs already funded, ADA-related improvements, monument lighting, flagpole lighting, electrical work to support the monument and the flag lighting. Are any of those validly funded, or was what I was reading incorrect?
Those are all funded at this time. The only additional funding we're looking for is for the irrigation system and then the electrical work to install light poles and the light poles themselves.
Okay,
We had
thank you very much.
prior
Good.
town meeting, we had previously voted to fund the other pieces. So I have Mrs. Alman, Mr. Freeland, and then Joe, did you have your? Okay, so we'll go right around.
My question is, the Parks Department means all the parks, right? Like Hedges Pond and Bartlett Pond, and so out of all those parks, this was number 2 in priority? That's just my question.
Okay, so this is my number 2 priority and capital request for this year. We don't prioritize this park as number 2 out of all the 40 parks that we take care of. Does that answer your question? Did I misunderstand your
Well,
question?
it answers my question, but I question why, like, Hedges Pond.
Isn't lit. Okay.
No, not lit, but there are capital improvements there, like the Great Hall, that obviously you don't want to improve. So I just wonder how these priorities are set. Thank you.
Mr. Brindisi?
Yeah, sure. So if the question, Ms. Edelman, I thought you said something about Hedges Pond. We're going through 2 master planning processes right now, one for Hedges Pond Recreation Area and one for Forges Field. So once that work is complete, you will definitely see the town come forward requesting resources to make improvements to those 2 areas.
If I could add to, with your concern for that being number 2 priority while we're looking at all the other parks, the training green, one of the major issues is the walkways that are there. They're deteriorating, they're unsafe. That is what put this project online as a top priority. This is just part of that project. So we want to include this now before we start all the construction so that we can save costs and we can do the complete project now. That's why it's a second priority.
Go ahead, Mr. Freeland.
What would the annual cost of do you anticipate the lighting to be? We're looking now past 27, electricity isn't free. Do you anticipate an annual cost for this lighting?
I actually can't speak to the annual costs, but I can say that they're somewhere in line with, the hundreds of other poles that we have throughout town. And we do, we obviously look to conserve energy when we're looking at the different poles, but I don't have an exact cost for you or how much it will cost in the future as well.
Oh, one last question. How about the annual cost for the maintenance of an irrigation system? Who's going to drain it in the fall? Who's
Sure.
going to ensure?
We do I could say we do most of that in-house. So we have irrigation systems at several of our parks. My team performs most of the maintenance unless it's something that's going to cost more man hours than it would to contract somebody. But we blow all the systems out ourselves. We, replace heads. We dig trenches up, replace breaks. We get breaks all the time at Brewster Gardens from different events, if people don't listen and they drive stakes through our irrigation pipes or something, we end up digging them up. So it would just be included in our operating budget. There would be no increase.
Thank you.
I have Mr. Hutchinson and then Ms. Holmes.
This might be for Mr. Brindisi or Lynn. But I was going on Pat's question about, so when you go through all of the items, I think there were over 40 that were submitted to the capital committee. Are there standard measurements for ranking things? And do you come up with rationales that are actually written down for the rankings? And do you do look backs? So sometimes the impact of a given item might be back 5 years, and you'll trace it across time, and be able to predict some efficiency or another. And I'm just wondering how you do this planning, I guess, is the sense of that question.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because, I'd start by saying I think that the capital improvement process is antiquated. Right now the bylaw drives that process, and the bylaw requires that the capital improvement committee goes through a ranking process. But I can tell you though, that how they rank things is typically, if it's public safety related, it rises to the top. If it's revenue generated, that'd be kind of a second tier. But I would also tell you, though, we have changed what we bring forward to CIC. So in the old days, 4 years ago, what would happen is that all the departments would bring all their priorities forward, and they would compete amongst each other and go through that ranking process. That no longer exists, although ranking still must take place because the bylaw requires of it. We meet with the department heads and we go through their priorities. And some of the things, as you can imagine, we can't afford, so we have to delay for a year. But we have those informed discussions with each one of the department heads. And so now the only items that go in front of CSC are the ones that we can afford. So there's no longer this competition of trying to leapfrog another. So we think that's been helpful, especially for the department heads. They no longer have to compete amongst their colleagues, knowing that, if CIC supports it, the funding is already available in order to make that request. The finance committee's job is to determine whether or not we want to pay for it. CIC's job is to determine whether or not we need it.
Ms. Holmes.
Yeah, so I'm really struggling to understand why we're being asked to vote on this again. So in what I'm being told, they've gone back and they've looked at the things that we were concerned about, but everything that they're now coming forward with as a repositioning of the same amount of money was already debated on the floor when we turned this down. And so when we're talking about where we stand financially in the town of Plymouth, Mr. Brindisi has just very clearly said to us that they've gone through and the healthcare costs are soaring and they're trying to drive efficiencies, and they've cut funding for our police and our fire department, which anybody that knows me knows I am 100% behind supporting. And we've had to cut those roles. And now we're being asked to vote in $87,000 for a irrigation system because of the quote eyesore for dead grass. And I'm really struggling to understand what our priorities are with this. I don't believe we should be voting this in. And I guess, if we're talking about public safety, which, now there's this fear factor here that there's a public safety issue in this park, I'd like to understand where are the safety concerns? And if the chief is there, could he please speak to how many wheelchairs have injured, disabled people in that park falling off the sidewalks, which was mentioned, or specifically, how many violent crimes that we had in that park, which would have been prevented by lighting? But I would much rather hire a fire department person or a police officer to keep our parks safe versus paying for lighting, which is unnecessary, or water to grow grass. And we've got to make some really hard decisions in the town of Plymouth. And this is the inconvenience of hard cuts so that we can build a school coming up. And if we're going to spend $250,000 for water and grass, we really need to realign our priorities. So if we could talk to, is there a violent crime issue in that park today that this would fix? And are we better served to hire a police officer?
Mr. Brindisi.
Sure. So, to my knowledge, there's no violent crimes taking place at this park. But I can tell you, and I mentioned this at town meeting, that both Chief Flynn and I, one of the complaints we get, and it's mostly during the summer hours, is that, and I'll focus mostly on unlit parking lots. And I mentioned this at town meeting. We get lots of complaints from residents that the parking lots in which, the neighborhood resides are unlit and are an attractive nuisance for, mostly younger age individuals who like to hang out at those areas. So, this park is very dark. And so, as pointed out by Mr. Fiala, lighting the park is just another mitigating factor to try to prevent that, that public nuisance. As far as the question about folks in wheelchairs and falling off the sidewalk, right now the park is not ADA accessible. So I would say that no, we probably don't have any problems with wheelchair users accessing the park because they can't access the park. And as Mr. Fiala pointed out in the past, these upgrades would allow accessibility for those folks with disabilities.
Mr. Brindisi, we passed in our last town meeting funding for ADA compliance for those sidewalks. So this bill that you're asking for right now is not about sidewalk safety for our disabled people, correct?
No, I was just referencing, you had mentioned folks in wheelchairs falling off the sidewalk.
was
And
what-
what I was saying
yeah.
is that's not a possibility right now because it's not ADA accessible today.
Right, and that was one of the things that the representative that spoke before, I can't remember his name, said was one of the concerns around lighting, that people in wheelchairs could fall off the sidewalks.
Understood.
Any other Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Originally, this was a project that was sponsored by Precinct 3, only because it was in our precinct. And we like to keep an eye on the precinct and everything about the precinct. So for some reason, it got paper shuffled somewhere and it didn't come forward. Then the town picked it up, which we're grateful to because it is a town piece of property. So Precinct 3 never had a vision, ever, of creating a breathtaking park with all the bells and whistles. However, many of our parks and beaches, we have spent a lot of money on making them American with Disability Act compliant, with wheelchair accessibility, special wheeled vehicles for the handicapped to access our parks. This is an extension of that, and we've already got town meeting approval to make the walkways ADA compliant. The second component of the ADA compliance is proper lighting. So we're not asking for all the bells and whistles here. All we're asking for, and I'm going to pass around a picture. Some of you have seen it. I just showed it to Alan, so he won't yell at me if I start this going to the right. But when it gets over to Mr. Hutchinson, if he can save it and give it to me at the end of the meeting, that'd be great. This is a picture of the green with the lighting that Mr. Fiala wants to put back in there. This only shows one light, and he's only asking for 5 more lights. This is not a big ask. It's ambient lighting, not spotlighting on the walkways. It's just a general lighting improvement so that we don't have handicapped accessible walkways unlit according to ADA requirements. So it's common sense, in my opinion, if we're going to tear up 50+% of that lot, that we do the work necessary to put it back together as much as it was, the way it was, when we tore it up. So and if anyone wants to see the original picture that I copied that from, you can do two things. And I see Mr. Hutchinson has done one recently. You can stop by Fast Eddie's Barber Shop and get a trim while you ask to see the original picture that is in Fast Eddie's Barber Shop across the street from the training green, which is his front yard. They love it. They want to see it maintained. And that picture came from Fast Eddie's Barber Shop. But thank you for the time.
Yep. While that's being passed around, I do have Pompey, and then Beth, I know you want to speak as well. So I haven't been in Fast Eddie's in a while, though, I'm not going to lie. So Pompey, go ahead.
Yeah, my concern is that the priorities were talked about. And the priority is to do a job when you can do it. And now is the time to consider this for that reason. And I think that the work is going to be done. The question is whether we do it completely. And I think that that's to be considered at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for the presentation. I think that above and beyond the practicalities of this park, I think we need to consider the history of the park as well. To me, history did not stop in 1620 when the rock was established, but that particular park does have a lot of history, both in terms of the monument itself, of the people that it represents, and also of the architect, the landscape architect that designed it, because it is a gem of a park in American history. And I think that it should be considered as much as Jenny Pond and Town Brook and all of the other wonderful infrastructure work that we're doing. It should be considered to be part of Plymouth's history and culture, in a sense.
Are there any, since we're picking out one thing at the moment, are there any further questions regarding this, this piece at the moment? Otherwise, I have another question about another piece within this. So Mr. Yes.
One final comment on this. The amount of money that's being asked in this article, and keep in mind, it is Article 40 out of 40 recommendations. So it's not the highest priority. However, the importance of it is, if one person slipped and fell and got seriously hurt and litigated the town, you would pay more than this in just legal fees, let alone any settlement. And I'm telling you, I walk down there frequently. It is in hazardous walking shape. I think the town might be advised to post a sign down there saying, walk at your own risk, park under construction or under a desire to be constructed, because it is hazardous walking for foot traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. I do have Mr. LaFrari. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I strongly support preserving the historic integrity of the training green. And I just want to make sure that we're prioritizing the repairs that are truly necessary. To make an informed decision, I personally need a clear breakdown of which elements of the project, such as walkway repairs, ADA improvements, etc., are already funded in the existing budget, and which items of the Article 18, I think it was, require new appropriations. I'm committed to supporting the essential preservation work, but I also want to be fiscally responsible. So a line item comparison of current funding versus proposed additional spending would be extremely helpful.
So I'll let the town answer that, but you received that when you voted on this the last time. And the 220 was cut out of it. So they're asking for this back in there, but you received all that information at the prior town meeting, which you voted on that article.
Okay, so we can't revisit that, I guess.
No,
Thank
what's
you.
before you is what was cut from that prior article. Well, it was a CPC article at the time, but there was a motion on the floor or prior to town meeting to remove the 220,000, which, as we know, in listening to the presentation here, that encompasses irrigation and lighting at the moment. There's nothing else within that, Nick, right? This is just strictly for lighting and irrigation.
Right, and the electrical work that's involved.
So that's $220,000 for both of those, Mr. LaFerry. Does that kind of answer your question? Because otherwise,
Yeah,
we
kind of.
funded everything else in our prior town meeting, which you looked at.
Yeah. I'm also curious about the $87,000 for the irrigation, if we're gonna be doing a lot of that work. So that's a little confusing as well.
Could you please repeat that? The last part about the irrigation?
Sure. I forget the 80 some odd $1,000 for the irrigation, if you feel that we can confidently do the work ourselves. I didn't know how much, why was it so much money?
Yeah, so that's right around the cost for an irrigation system of that size to be contracted. We maintain and make repairs to our existing irrigation systems, which was a question that came up earlier. We don't do the total installation of a commercial system all at once. Where this project is going to be under contract, to have my crew in there doing irrigation work while there's other engineers and construction companies in there doing their work, it would really get messy. Plus, we don't have the time, the resources, the manpower to be putting in a commercial irrigation system of this size. But we would be making repairs and maintaining just like we do in most of our other parks.
So the answer is very similar to Mr. Brindisi
Yeah.
earlier. I think what I'm hearing from you is very similar to what Mr. Brindisi said about we try and do some things in-house, but this is, I don't want to diminish your department, but this is a too large of a project to take on with the current state of everything else that you're working on, other irrigation systems, other stuffs within parks and forestry. Is that,
Yeah,
am I
if
hearing that?
if we had
I'm trying. I'm not demeaning. Just trying to boil it down.
no worries, Mr. Tavares. I completely understand what you're saying. If we had double the resources and I could direct them to install the irrigation system, we are certainly capable. Unfortunately, we don't have those resources. And that's the reason why this would be one of the reasons why this would be contracted out.
Any further comment within the room? I do see Len. I do see your hand up, but I'm going to save that till the public comment regarding this article because I want to see if there's any other questions regarding anything within Article 18. There's a number of items. Are there any other questions from the COPC? I do have one question, and maybe it's just because of the way I printed it or how the cells work on the Town Wharf Phase 2, 1.5. I see the source is a grant request submitted. Is that for the full amount? I'm just not sure, because I see in other columns, I see, a mass reimbursement for $7,500 for a Chevy Blazer or whatever, but I'm not sure what the full amount is, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Chad Hunter, Plymouth Harbor Master. So we weren't sure on the timing with this when we submitted this back in October, but we have received an award from Seaport.
Oh,
That award was $1.2 million towards this project. So the only thing that's required from the town side is $300,000 for a match.
okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's the problem with sometimes when we get things all off kilter. Any further questions or comments under Article 18? Okay, I did receive a request for a town meeting member to speak to Article 18. And you all also received in your package, or it might have been under a separate header, but a letter from Mr. Stone from Precinct 16. So I did agree to Mr. Stone that he could have some time during public comment to speak. So go ahead, Mr. Stone.
Okay, thank you. So Ken Stone, Precinct 16. I'm here to speak in opposition of refunding the irrigation and the lamps. I want to point out that the Advisory and Finance Committee voted 9-4 not to recommend funding this expenditure, that the Capital Improvement Committee rated this project as an extremely low priority, 38 out of 40 possible projects. And I'd remind you what Mr. Brandisi said about how public safety goes into what rises to the top and what doesn't. The Historical Commission on Tuesday unanimously voted against placing street lamps of any sort, 19th century replica or not, within the green as a violation of its historic integrity and of Olmsted's design. So the claims that have been made that town meeting members didn't understand that the lights would be historic replicas and that the fiscal concerns were solely related to seeking funds from the CPC as well as lighting being necessary for safety, I and others believe that all of those statements are erroneous. All of the historical arguments made at the fall town meeting regarding the lights were focused on the location, the cost, and the necessity of the lamps, not on the aesthetics of the lamp's design. That was never mentioned at town meeting. And the counter arguments focused on dismissing concerns over respecting the value of preserving and fulfilling Olmsted's design versus what we would believe is inappropriately altering. Olmsted is America's preeminent architect landscape. He designed the grounds of the U.S. Capitol, Central Park in New York City, Boston Garden, the Emerald Necklace. He's world-renowned. He also, by the way, was a summer resident of Plymouth. So we have a connection in that regard. His work needs to be preserved as it was meant to be, and as the Historic Commission has now suggested. In terms of safety, there is actually no data, no documentation suggesting safety concerns with the green. I have 5 years of police and fire department reports, 0 violent crimes, no vandalism. There was 1 vandalism of the park in 1907. No vandalism in the last 5 years. No calls for drug use or drug dealing. None for loitering. Only 3 incidents of intoxication. 1 per year in 2020, 21, 22, none in the last 3 years, going on 4, and no calls for injuries of any sort inside that green. Lights for safety is an expensive solution in search of a problem. Regarding the irrigation, all the irrigation systems installed downtown, except for apparently in the garden, are no longer used. The one at Veterans Field apparently ceased being used after only 2 years. So we're being asked to spend not $87,000, that doesn't include the electrical work. If you include the electrical work, it's well north of $100,000 to put in the irrigation and make the same mistake a 4th time. Funds remain, as was said, for restoring the walkways and the stairs, for making the green ADA compliant, and for honoring our veterans by lighting the memorial and the flag in a way that don't violate the historical character of the green. There'll be very low ground-based lamps instead of the tall ones. So at a time when there's talk of the town facing fiscal crisis, the possibility of Prop 2.5 overrides, surface cuts, hiring freezes in the DPW and fire and police and HR and in IT, many of us agree with Advisory and Finance's recommendation that we should not be spending $250,000 on work that is not necessary and is a low priority, regardless of the funding source, whether it's the CPC or from free cash. So I will be making a motion to separate priority 2 from Article 18, and I will advocate for respecting town meeting's well-reasoned decision last fall to not spend this money in those manners. And I hope you will support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to.
Nick Fila, Parks and Forestry. Just a couple things that stood out for me. Downtown irrigation, we have Brewster Gardens, Nook. I don't know why I wrote Nook. Town Hall Green, Depot Park, Seaver Field, Information Center. Those all have irrigation systems maintained by the parks that are up and running during the watering season.
Are those, but those also follow like the town regulations when we go to water ban, or not water ban, but restricted use?
Restrictions, yep. So I just wanted to note that we do have plenty of irrigation systems that we maintain, not just Brewster Gardens. And my crew does a great job keeping them up and running. So
To Mr. Stone's point on, I thought that I had heard from you that this 220,000 for irrigation and lighting included electrical work, but to Mr. Stone's point that it didn't include electrical work, could we get a definitive answer on that?
yeah, actually might have that right here. So the 220,000 includes $60,000 for the lights themselves, $87,000 for the irrigation system itself, and $73,000 for all electrical work, which includes trenching, conduit, contract services, testing, permits, all that stuff. So yes, the 220 does include all additional electrical needs. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Any further questions or comments within the room or the public? Otherwise, I'm going to go to there's a hand raised from the public online. Mr. Levin, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Sure, Will. Thank you very much. Just for full disclosure, my name is Len Levin. I'm the clerk of the Community Preservation Committee. And this article, when it was up for discussion last summer, for last fall's town meeting, there was a lot of discussion about this. And there's conflicting numbers of how much this would meet. I have the spreadsheet which was the cost estimate back at the time. And the discussion about this article in general, and I know we're talking about just the 200, but it came to us as an open space recreation article, and we kept talking about historical significance, and we all didn't understand why it wasn't historical. But to take off my CPC hat and put off my tax-paying resident hat, I think the whole capital budget should be looked at in a time when you're worried about spending money. We shouldn't be taking on any debt. Everything is in my mind is discretionary. And we should be putting the money in places to pay for things like schools and new fire stations. I agree with a lot of your members said. Mr. Stone stole a lot of my words that I was going to speak to. But I just find it very interesting that this was already adjudicated and now it shows up again. And I think it's kind of interesting that we hear about not funding one thing but we want to fund this. And it doesn't make sense to me. So I encourage you guys and your members, when you go to town meeting to talk about this whole article and about parts of it, about whether or not with the kind of financial issues we're dealing with, that we should be doing this right now. This is all discretionary spending as far as I'm concerned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Levin.
Do you mind? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you respond.
Ken, I just want to ask, did you say it was the Historical Commission that you spoke with?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the very first meetings that I attended for this project and brought this design to was the Historical Commission, including the lights within the park. They were fully supportive of the project, and one of the only concerns that came up from one of the members are the lights going to resemble what was used in that era? And that was the first time that concern popped up, but at that time the design was 95% already, or it was 65% on its way to 95%. So we didn't change the lights at that time. It was the concern at the town meeting that had us.
You can save it for April.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. So I think a good takeaway from this is, unfortunately, I pulled out a ranked 40 item, and look how long of debate we had on it. I would highly encourage the members of this body, along with your precinct members, there are a whole lot of other ones on there. Please take a look. I'm not saying that we can't do all of these things or we can do all of these things, but you've heard from residents this evening and you've heard from others within your precincts, I'm sure, about the rising costs of everything, and this town needs to look at different ways to save money. So that was ranked number 40, and look what time we spent on it. And then there are other much different items within that budget, so please hit the homework. Yeah, go
I
ahead,
just
Lynn.
wanted to make one comment regarding all of the capital projects. So all of the backup information that the department submitted is online on the Capital Improvements Committee website, and I think we provided a link to you in the memo that was
Yes,
given.
it's on the memo, but I think when the memo got shared with us, you can't
Okay.
click the link, but
It's on the Capital Improvements Committee webpage. And over on the left-hand side, it would say 2026, Springtown meeting, projects or something like that. And you click on that, and each and every project is listed.
Right, so we would see kind of that breakdown that we
Yeah.
were looking for
Yeah.
earlier from Nick. Are there any further questions or comments on anything within Article 18? Hearing and seeing none. Lynn, I don't know if you want to talk about the fire equipment purchase, the revised Article 19, the funding source. Looks like free cash, you're suggesting using free cash for a savings?
Yeah, so we're just gonna not borrow and replace the funding source with free cash.
Sorry, I've got to do admin duty, man. Any questions from the public? That being said, we're going to move on to Mr. Canty's presentation on Article 14, the Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund. Presentation says Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund and you? Figured. So I'm just going to take about 30 seconds here, just while Mr. Canty prepares his presentation, and I know we have some members leaving the room. Mr. Canty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So this is in regards to what is Article 14, a recurring article to fund the Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund. In prior years, at least recent prior years, Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund monies have been sourced from raising and appropriating from the general fund. This year, there is a proposal to instead use free cash. So you saw earlier on the list that one of the revenues was taking the raise and appropriate money down and zeroing that out. And then instead, we are looking to source this money from free cash. We will talk more about that as the presentation continues, but just in case that was a threshold question for any members, that has been addressed. So in any ways, the purpose of this fund. So the fund was created in spring town meeting in 2013. At its creation, it was created primarily for tax mitigation for when the plant ceased operations. The plant had been operating since 1972. It was known in 2013, it was known the day it opened, that it wouldn't be operating in perpetuity. In 2013, they started planning for its eventual closure. One could argue it was a bit late. Nevertheless, that was when the planning for that started. However, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5B, says at the time of creating any stabilization fund, the city, town, or district shall specify, and at any later time may alter the purpose of the fund, which may be for any lawful purpose. So what does that mean? So that means, although it was originally created with the idea of tax mitigation in a direct way, you can use it for any lawful purpose, including potentially, if one were interested, the purchase of property, which is what we are hoping that the fund will eventually be used in whole or in part for. But we will again talk about that further. So this up here is the Holtec parcel, 1,530.35 acres, the single largest undeveloped parcel in the town of Plymouth. Also, it has the highest point within a mile of the ocean between a point in Georgia and a point in Maine along the eastern seaboard. So there are some very scenic components to it. This is the area right here where Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station used to be. This here, and on this side here, that's the roadway that cuts through it, State Road. This is Powerhouse Road up here. So
Interrupt you for a second. If you're going to have conversations within the room, could you please, it's hard for us to hear up here. We just ask that you just step into the hall if you need to have a conversation. Thank you.
Okay. So, as I was saying, this is the road. That's State Road. This is Powerhouse Road. That particular road, Powerhouse Road, is an area that could be developed if it were bought by private hands. Residential, commercial, other purposes right there. This is like the Rocky Hill Road area. It's an area over here that is prime for development. Lots of this area is a grade that's so significant that at least with current technology would be challenging to develop. But those particular areas are of high interest for development. And obviously, depending on the disposition of the plant and what's going to happen in that particular area, has been previously developed, could be developed once again. When the plant does close, well, it has closed, but when the plant is done being decommissioned, at least as of right now, this area here, which is the area that has the dry cask storage of spent nuclear fuel rods, will remain there. Currently, there is no plan for when or if those nuclear fuel rods will be removed from the site. There was a plan in place for a time for them to be sent to Nevada to a facility called Yucca Mountain that was fully funded to be built. And then prior to it accepting spent nuclear fuel, that directive was terminated. So there is currently no repository for civilian nuclear waste in the United States. That is an ongoing issue that we need to look at. I just want to flag that for folks. The parcel, we have undergone a town planning process for future use of the parcel, the Pilgrim 1600 plan. And that parcel sought community interest and input in what people would like to see happen with this particular parcel. But it's important to note that with very few exceptions, if we do not own parts or all of the parcel, the ability for us to direct what happens there is extremely limited. Because the areas that are ripe for development, we could, in theory, zone them to try and direct the development that we'd like to see. But as we are often seeing throughout the community, there are many developers, out-of-town developers, that come into our community and build projects that we don't want in places we don't want because they can do something like a 40B and override local zoning and directives. The only way to truly control what happens on land is to own the land, and we feel that owning as much of this parcel as possible, being able to buy it and choose as a community what we want to see done on it is an important directive for the future of Plymouth. I would also highlight that this area where the plant was, there was originally a plan to have not one but 3 nuclear reactors on this site. So the NRC, that when you open a nuclear power plant, you have a license through the NRC to operate that. That license, despite the fact that the plant no longer is generating power, still exists in a decommissioning phase. And that license is still active for the entire footprint of what would have been Pilgrim 1, what was actually built, as well as 2 and 3, which goes down here. While the plant is being decommissioned, including the tearing down of the structures, as well as the disposition of the wastewater and other byproducts there, the license is still active. Currently, one of my duties as the member of the select board is being the liaison to and having been elected as chair of the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. Holtec Decommissioning International has indicated that under their current plans for decommissioning, the plant will be decommissioned and deconstructed in approximately 2035. That timeline contemplates that they would be able to discharge or dump, in common parlance, the remaining wastewater into Cape Cod Bay. That is a matter that is being litigated. on the state level, maybe eventually be litigated on the federal level. They have said that if they are unable to discharge or dump the water into the bay, that may prolong that time span. But the remaining sources of revenue for Holtec Decommissioning International are the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund, which was funded through plant revenues while the plant was operated, and is there to fund both the decommissioning process as well as provide a profit margin for Holtec at the end. So they're trying to maximize their return on that particular investment. The other source of potential revenue for the company is the land that they hold and control. So for now, while they are decommissioning through 2035, their license extends to that area, approximately. However, once it's decommissioned, they will get, and to that point, and all the wastewater and other materials on this site are removed, they will get what is called partial site release. And at partial site release, the license will be shrunk to just the pad of nuclear fuel rods there, and the other area will be released from the license. And at that time, the most economically viable area of the property will be subject to potentially being sold. There'd be very little incentive for Holtec to maintain ownership of the property after that point, because they'd be paying taxes on a property or through a pilot on property that no longer is serving a beneficial economic use. So we are trying to plan, although we didn't start planning until 2013 for what to do with this parcel afterwards, what to do with the lack of the plant afterwards. We think it is imperative that we get out ahead of what the future of this parcel will be now rather than later, because if it is developed for residential, either apartments or owner or condos or houses, then we're going to have to deliver services to the people that live there. Even if it's developed for commercial purposes, we would have to deliver services there, although commercial tends to pay more in taxes than they consume in services. But either way, we believe that it is imperative that we control the destiny of what happens to the parcel as a community, because if it is developed in a residential posture, the amount of services that would be required, particularly in the area in which it is located, which is already a bottleneck with poor infrastructure leading up to it, would be a significant challenge for the schools, for emergency services, police and fire, for DPW to maintain to a lesser extent, but certainly during snow emergencies and such, depending on the density. So we think, and those services are driven by who lives there. A child in the schools costs approximately $25,000 a year. We don't know how it would be developed residentially, but that's the single biggest driver of costs in terms of services that residents consume. But the existence of residents intrinsically means a cost increase in services developed. So, back in 2023, we developed a pilot agreement with Holtec Decommissioning International. That pilot agreement provides for $13 million in payments to the town over the 8 years that it is in existence, with no appeals to litigate. They were previously litigating the amount that they were being assessed before that terminated that process. It also strengthens the town's intrinsic right of first refusal on the property, because it's in Chapter 61 status, by extending the time frame for that right of first refusal and eliminating the ability of Holtec to pay back taxes to discharge it during the 8 years of the pilot agreement. It also grants access to the town for appraisal purposes on an annual basis. The extended right of first refusal is for 270 days, so having an appraisal that's annually updated allows us to more rapidly respond to any particular part or the entirety of the parcel coming on the market. So we're always ready to do that. Also gives the town, during the pendency of the pilot agreement, a $3 million account credit to be used for some or all of a purchase of land during that 8 years. And it engaged at this point the town and Holtec in a master planning process for the land to determine its future uses. That process has already been completed. So, Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund balance. When we negotiated that pilot, we estimated that in $2023, as you can see at the bottom. that the parcel, if it had entirely gone on the market at one time, would have cost between $35 and $50 million. Obviously, although the cost of land ebbs and flows over time, it trends upwards. So since 2023, it has only grown in price over time. The current balance of the fund is $11 million. The desired contribution for this year to be appropriated from free cash is $500 million. That would result in a balance of $11.5 million. Last year at this time, when I was standing before you advocating for this same action to be taken, the balance going into spring annual town meeting was $9.9 million. We contributed at that spring annual town meeting an additional $500,000, which brought it up to $10.4 million. So that's important to highlight because that's the last time you put money in the fund, and it brought it to 10.4, and now it's at 11. So in the last year, without doing anything, the fund has gained $600,000. That's because of interest. Money that is in a stabilization fund can be invested in instruments that gain more interest than free cash does just staying in the free cash account. So, personally, I think a good use of this fund would be to buy some or all of this parcel if and when it comes on the market. However, in the event that you don't think that it is a good idea for the town to buy this land, or you don't think that that is a priority for this money, it is still a good idea to put $500,000 from free cash into this fund because it gains interests in this fund over time. It gained $600,000 in the past year, and it will only gain further money later. Money in free cash does gain interest, but because it's in a much more liquid state, it gains much lower interest that it's in when it's in free cash. So by taking $500,000 out of free cash and putting it in a higher interest return, even if we were to use it for any lawful purpose, including what we use free cash for, buying police cruisers or dump trucks or possibly buying lighting in a park, we could use it for that purpose later on because it would gain money in this fund and be available for any lawful purpose, including all of those purposes and all of the other 39 purposes that are outlined in the Article 18 of this particular town meeting. But if you do think it's a good idea to buy some or all of this parcel, then having this money in there now while we still have free cash to invest is a good idea, because in the last year we gained $600,000 just by having it sit there. So let's say if this is the last time we put money in this fund for the next 9 years, at least the fund will have 9 years of additional time to gain interest, to be either the entirety of a purchase or a significant down payment on a future purchase of some or all of the land. The land may come on the market all at once, may come on individually. While the right of first refusal is in place, we have an additional $3 million, but that $3 million expires when the pilot agreement terminates. But the pilot was designed to buy us time, to give us time to do things like this and invest the money for a future purpose. And it's serving that purpose. So even if that pilot goes away, and for some reason we didn't renegotiate a successor agreement, which we probably would, the $3 million is less important than the 8 years that it would buy us. Because in that 8 years, we're able to put more money away, we're able to gain more interest on that money, and we're able to go through the master planning process that we've completed and do the other things that we've done to prepare this community to get out ahead of this problem. For years and years, this community has been reacting to decisions made by private entities, private developers, and not choosing its own destiny, not charting its own course, and planning for the future. And this is an example of the town trying to plan for the future by getting out ahead of a potential problem, a massive residential development that could be developed in that area, so that we don't have to deliver services to that in perpetuity. And instead, we could buy the land and use it for what we as a community believe is in the best interest of the community, rather than what a private entity believes is in the best interest of this community, when really what they believe is what is in the best interest of them. So I am asking for $500,000 to kindly be appropriated from free cash and put into this particular fund so it can gain interest and, in my preference, be available for a future purchase of this land. But it could also be available for any other lawful purpose. Money goes into the fund using only through town meeting and can only be taken out of this fund through town meeting action. I am available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Canty. I look to the COPC for either any questions within the room or online. Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Canty. What was the most recent assessed value of the property?
We would have to assessed value.
Well, didn't you say every year you get an assessed
Well, we
value
do
of the land?
We do
What's the most recent one?
appraisals. So
Appraisal.
you want the most recent appraised value? We
Yeah.
can get that information for you.
I'm
But
sorry, I
appraised
used the wrong
value and
word.
assessed values are two different.
No, I correct myself, you're right. What is the appraised value of the most recent study?
So we could get that information. Yeah. Yeah, David Gould, who was here but left, he can get that information for us and we can get that for you. We can have that for town meeting.
And in your final remarks, I think you answered my second question. The present 11 million that's in there now
Yes.
can only be used for lawful purposes in the town,
Sadly.
approved by town meeting.
Correct.
So it could have been used for a budget shortfalls that we almost experienced this last term or future. Is that correct?
It could.
Can you put back in? Okay.
So but the problem with that, as I see it, is that if you use one-time revenue, we generally don't want to use one-time revenue to fix a budget shortfall because a budget is a recurring expense. So if you fill a hole for 1 year with one-time revenue, you haven't solved the problem that caused that hole. And next year, when you don't have the one-time revenue to fill that hole, then you have twice the problem you did before.
No, I understand it may not be the most desirable action, but in the event that you had to do it, you could do it, correct?
You could,
Yeah.
correct.
Thank you.
And the reason I think that buying the land would be better is because if you did use it for tax mitigation in terms of just lowering the tax bill for residents, that would be gone once it's used up. But if it's bought for residential purposes, you're going to have to pay to deliver services in perpetuity to the people that live there. And over time, the cost of delivering those services is going to far outweigh the short-term benefit of a tax reduction, particularly when you're talking about if we had 11.5 million versus a $325 million budget annually. But you could do that.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Vautrin.
Has any group or anyone expressed interest to the town about purchasing this?
Purchasing the land?
Yeah, or some of it. I mean, I think I've heard Pine Hills is interested, but I don't know how accurate that is.
Well, the Pine Hills interest has been a matter of rumor and speculation for a number of years.
Mhm.
The last I had heard officially from somebody that could speak for Pine Hills was that they were not interested. But that could ebb and flow. There have been private entities with speculative projects proposed for that area. But Holtec, the problem right now is not who's interested in buying it, but Holtec right now is not interested in selling it. A few years ago, there was an initiative to try and acquire it for the town that fell apart because Holtec wanted to sell it up to a point, and then the CEO of the company reversed that decision. So obviously we can't, well, we could eminent domain it, I suppose, but that's not free. You have to pay fair market value. But beyond taking an eminent domain taking, you have to have a willing seller. And currently there's not a willing seller. And I think a big part of that is because of the existence of the license and the fact that it covers the biggest economically viable section of it, and that it's a more attractive purchase or sale product, rather, to sell it when all of the economically viable areas are free and clear of any restrictions.
Okay, thank you. And what percentage of interest was it earning? 6%?
I'd have to do the math.
I'm just curious.
So
Lynn can do
we,
it.
so we have, the nuclear mitigation in our investment policy falls under, we allocate about 69% of it to fixed income, 30% to equities, and 1% to cash. So over the last 1 year, it earned 7.56%. 3 years was 5.86%. 5 years was 4.21. And since inception, we're with Rockland Trust since 2019. It's 5.2.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's good.
I've got Chris online, and then Beth, I'll go to you next. Okay. So Chris, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Mr. Chair. Kevin, in regards to Holtec, what's their interest in probably building a mini reactor? I know they're successful at another location here in the US of doing that. And in respects to that, partnering with like Meta or Google building the data center on the site probably adjacent.
Sure.
Has there been any discussions of that happening here in Plymouth?
Yeah, so as part of my service on the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel, I've had an opportunity to talk to representatives of Holtec in various capacities. Holtec currently doesn't view Massachusetts as a viable site for a new nuclear reactor of any type, anywhere, including the area that they own, because right now there is a requirement that there be a statewide referendum to open up a new nuclear reactor. And it is not viewed by them that that is likely to pass, and that would require a significant amount of investment and advocacy to go through that campaign, not to mention all of the pre-work and construction work, engineering work to actually build one or more of these reactors. So for right now, there's a threshold issue that as long as that statewide referendum requirement exists, they do not view Massachusetts as a viable site to even begin talking about one or more nuclear reactors.
Thank you. Beth?
Thanks, Kevin. Could you please speak to the right of first refusal and whether or not that would put the town of Plymouth sort of in line in front of any other potential purchasers of the property?
Yes. So during the existence of the pilot, it does. The land is in, most of the land is in Chapter 61 forestry status. So even without the pilot, there's a Chapter 61 right of first refusal. But by its very nature, it puts us before any buyer. So, evil company A wants to buy the land. And we say, well, we thought about it and we don't want evil company A in our town. We have a right of first refusal that we have a certain period of time to make an offer, but we have to match their offer as long as it's a bona fide offer. And the nuances of that are complex. We dealt with a similar situation with other Chapter 61 land at Atlantic Country Club over the summer, which was not subject to the expanded right of first refusal here. But if a bona fide offer comes in, and with Atlantic, our contention was it hadn't, but if one did come in, we would have a time frame in which to respond, no matter who's buying it. And we would have the opportunity to make that decision. But we need to be able to match it either with funds on hand or borrowing we do, partnering with funds we have access to like CPC, or partnering with a private entity like Wildlands Trust or something like that, or getting a grant, something like that. But just that's the process. So no matter, as long as the right of first refusal exists, we have that right. They can't, what I mentioned in the pilot is you can take land out of Chapter 61 and pay the back taxes and get away from that right of first refusal. But during the pendency of the pilot, they can't do that. So that's an added protection that we have, at least for this 8-year period. We would seek to extend this because this is gonna wrap up in 2031, and we're not predicting that they're gonna want to sell this until 2035 or thereabouts. So we would look to renegotiate this, but just talking about the facts on the ground as they exist currently.
Thank you, Ben. Any further questions or comments from the COPC, either online or? Hearing or seeing none, I'll allow for public comment. Mr. Canty, as we do. Go ahead, Mr. Lynch. And this is regarding Article 14, right? Yep.
Yes, Kevin Lynch, article, long night, precinct 5. You know, I really appreciate Kevin coming in here and sharing all this information. And if you're a veteran of town business, you've heard this before, you've seen this before, to a degree. I was wondering, is there any possibility, Mr. Canty, if you could boil this all down, the bare basics, not so much the slide, but I'm wondering, is there any possibility of getting an executive summary of what your information is all about? Just the bare facts so I could share with my constituents. That would be number one. Well, in a sense, but I'll also elaborate then on it, because I'm looking, there's a lot of stuff that's been brought up, and I'm trying to, juggle all this in my head, how to write it down, and so I think it would be helpful that I could then present it to my constituents. I think that would be about it, except, again, I'm really intrigued by this whole small modular reactor that Mr. Merrill brought up. And we bring up, this boogeyman that there's a statewide referendum. I think the winds are changing a little bit. I think people are a little bit wanting to have a little bit of different flavor within Massachusetts politics. And as far as a statewide referendum, I think there's a good possibility that it could be put on the ballot. And let's just see where it is and show other parts of the country that we are business friendly. So I throw that out there and hoping, but again, if you could get and speak to the point and get back to, if I could just go up to the 4th floor, grab 2-page piece of paper with all of your main points there so I could be able to go and share with my constituents. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Canty, do you have any response to that, or?
I could look into condensing it into a 2-page document. I can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the public, either in the room, which is really just Mr. Lynch, and then any online? Hearing and seeing none, thank you, Mr. Canty, for the presentation.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Okay. New business. I just have a couple of quick announcements. One, I just wanted to remind everybody, February 28th, so next Thursday, in this room, that there's going to be an open meeting law training from the town clerk, and that's at 6 p.m. She did mention it when she was here before, but I just wanted to put it back out there because that's a week from tonight. The other thing I wanted to mention, some of you have seen them. We had spoken about this a bit back, the League of Women Voters having get out the vote signs, and some of you gave me numbers. They'll be here at each of the next, so the March meeting, April meeting, before the town meeting. If you like those signs, they'll be here before the meeting and you can pick them up. All they ask is just to also give them an address as to where they're going, so they know how to keep track of how many signs they have out, et cetera. Next piece, we had originally booked meetings to get through all of our articles. With the way that speakers for different articles lined up, there's going to be no meeting on Monday, March 9th, which we had tentatively scheduled. So it'll just be the regular March 19th, third Thursday meeting. Okay. And then Kristen will be back, and she and we've already got a draft of the agenda, but that should be coming out to you folks soon. And is there that being said, is there any other new business to come before the COPC? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I just had one quick thing sort of related to the League of Women Voters. I was surprised and a little bit dismayed when I heard at the select board meeting on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, that people who want to vote by mail in the May election will not receive a reminder in the mail that they can vote by mail. And I think that given how difficult it is to get people out to vote in Plymouth, I'm concerned that this is going to cause even lower voter turnout for two reasons. One, because they won't receive a reminder, and because they will have to go to the town clerk's office to complete the request to vote by mail, both of which I think would be an obstacle to voting for those people who vote by mail is meant to help, like people who can't drive, people who can't take off from work to go to town hall during business hours, and et cetera. So I think it's a real detriment. To me, it just means that as precinct chairs, we really have to be assiduous in getting out the vote in our own precincts. And I would think also we might want to be talking with the town clerk about other mechanisms for getting out reminders to vote by mail. For example, I imagine there's a tax bill coming up at some point. Maybe there could be just a small leaflet or flyer, very quick notice in that goes to all residents of Plymouth. Thank you.
I saw, Mr. LaFerry, you had your hand up. Do you have any new business, or it's now down, so I'm not sure.
Well, I was just going to ask a question about the open meeting training.
Sure.
You said-
Go
you
ahead.
said I can ask the clerk, but I gotta be out of town that day, last minute change. And I was just wondering if there was a makeup session for that or how to handle that. But I can ask her. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I was just doing the friendly reminder piece. Any other new business within the room? Yep, Pat?
I just want to report on a Zoom meeting I attended with the health assessment focus group, and I'll be interested to see what they report out. It was a very interested meeting. Thank you.
Any other new business? Or do you want to elaborate on what that was about a little bit more, Pat, please?
Well, apparently it's a health assessment that the town has contracted with. And I was,
Department of Health.
I'm not even sure if, I thought it was the Center for Active, what is it?
The cow.
It is, yeah. And the questions really, it wasn't focused on health. It's like the biggest point was the communication in the town, and communicating and feeling, part of a community has a lot to do with health. So the major point that I took out of that meeting is that people felt there was not enough communication. And I was surprised because we have a communication director, and I don't know where this is going. But
Okay, did they give you any indication as to when that we might see anything?
no, they're still trying to get input from other focus groups.
If I get my finger on the pulse, I'll update us as well. Okay. Well, thank you for participating in that. Any other new business before the committee? Any old business before the committee? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Mr. Lynch.
Okay, one more time here. Kevin Lynch, Precinct 5. Got that one right. I just want to reiterate what I said last meeting, and I'd like to make sure it's on record that I spoke about, or I mentioned that particular idea of the traveling town meeting. And what was very good also, just as a little bit of an insight, Advisory and Finance, Mr. Lally sitting in that seat, it was very nice. I mentioned that it'd be great to have public comment to also sometimes be a give and take. I realize I've seen the select board says we don't, elaborate on public comment, that's it. And speaking of communication, Pat, I really think that's a big, big issue here in town. Information is not getting out. People have a difficult time getting that information from the town itself. And I will mention a gentleman at the Cal. There's a men's meeting tomorrow. Mr. Costello's been there, and I don't know if anyone else. Joe, you've been there. And 9 to 10:30, and 20 guys sit around at these big tables right here, and my father would call it the Liars Club. But anyway, they talk about this and that, and there's one gentleman there, and I will give him credit. His name is Andy. And he really synthesized the whole idea of communication, and he said, it's almost like there's a moat around town hall. Again, immediately your mind goes to that. Very difficult to get across that moat to get information or to get that information out. So I mentioned that. So getting back to, again, traveling town meeting is bringing government to the people. I mentioned the fact is, again, I'd like to have it on record that town meeting update, we should have a dedicated Facebook page, only limited to the 162 town meeting members. So Mr. Weber could bring up why we really need, the lighting and the irrigation on the training green versus Mr. Stone could be a pro and con so people could actually see both sides of the issues, but only limited to the actual town meeting members. So no one else, if they want to go and have their opinion be known, they can contact their town meeting members. And then Mr. Canty would probably even be called upon, drafted to maybe even speak about, well, what's happening with the Pilgrim thing, the Holtec, during something that I threw out to you folks, and I ask you to strongly consider. We're about to go and experience, I think next week, a State of the Union address. That only happens once a year. I advocate a State of the Town address twice a year, February and August. Again, speaking to communication, and we can revisit that. And then I know this is near and dear to Mr. Tavares' heart, and that's the July 4th parade. I threw that out that perhaps those that could maybe walk in the parade, meet and greet the citizens, put faces to who you are, town officials also. And so that would be that, and I just want to, it's just, again, I'm going to say something, I won't say the kind of what rude saying, you can ask me later on, but I'll just simply say, talk is difficult to comprehend. It goes in one ear, we try to go and retain it, we write notes down also, but it go right out. So talk is difficult to comprehend. Put it on paper, and again, with all due respect, that's why I asked Mr. Canty to get an executive summary. So those are all things perhaps for you to chew on and think about, and I appreciate your time. Or, like Mr. Lally did,
Thank you.
as I walked away, he asked me a clarifying question.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I have tried to be fairly fluid with public comment here and at times commenting back or allowing board members to clarify things because I do see our body as being a little bit different than the select board body, which is, the executive branch, but we're the legislative branch and we each have constituents that we represent. And I know that sometimes we need to clarify different things during public comment. And I think at the select board level, they get far more public comment. And if they were to do that, they'd be there all night. So I like to allow for a little bit of tolerance to that. I think I know since this has been 2 meetings that you brought up most of this, the February 9th meeting and then this one as well. I think just to a couple of your points, and you've got a lot of fantastic points, and so I can't speak to each one of them. I think that in all honesty, next Thursday at the open meeting law presentation, that is probably your best place to ask about a 162 member Facebook page that only town meeting members can speak upon. Everyone can see it. I understand that. But I think that that's where you're going to get your best answer. Yeah. As COPC, I don't think we're going to venture into who admins that and does all that. So I think that that's the best place to talk to that. As far as the state of the town, twice a year, you do get that. That's what the chairman of the select board should be doing at the spring meeting and the fall town meeting. Different chairmen, I've sat through, just like you, a number of different points of, call it, the state of the town. Some are more elaborate than others and more eloquent than others, and some are very short and to the point. So that is where the actual state of the town. And Mr. Lynch, I'm not going to get into a back and forth. I'm just giving you a couple of just points that you'll probably hear. But I think as far as the traveling town meeting, I'd love to talk to you afterwards about that and what you're kind of envisioning on that, because I have a few questions, but I don't, again, want to get into the back and forth, and we can do that offline. I did have a piece of old business that I forgot to follow up on. I am working with Kristen on the letter that you spoke about at the last meeting. So.
Oh, very good, thank you.
Forgot.
No problem, thank you for doing that.
Any further public comment? Hearing and seeing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment, and we'll see you on March 19th at 6 p.m. right here.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Approved. Thank you. Second and approved. Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.